Well, welcome to Taking Flight. My name is Dr. Heather Dartez, and I'm the Director of Graduate Programs at Full Sail University. And we are doing a panel today on self-publishing and distribution. And I am joined by an amazing group of panelists and some people that I've known for a really long time. I'm going to start with our first panelist who's joining me in the studio today, Kim Kraft. We've worked together for over 15 years now, which is amazing. And she and I work together as instructors in the Entertainment Business Masters program, where she teaches entertainment media publishing and distribution. Our next guest is Matt Peters. He is joining us virtually, and he is a creative writing bachelor's course director. He teaches a class called Publishing and Distribution. And then, of course, we have a guest who has joined us now for the second time on Taking Flight, Mr. Phil Pallen, who is joining us from Berlin. He is an entertainment business master's grad who actually took a course from Kim on self-publishing and distribution many, many years ago. He is also a Full Sail Hall of Famer, so he's famous here at Full Sail.
Star student, yes.
And his day job is he's a brand strategist and keynote speaker. He speaks all around the world, and he's also published a couple books now. So we're very proud that he's able to join us. So I'm thrilled to be joined by such esteemed experts in this area, and look forward to hearing everything they have to share, because this is a topic that personally interests me myself, because I would like to self-publish a book at some point. So I'm going to start by asking each of you to share just a little bit about your background and experience. I'll start with Kim, if you could share a little bit about your journey as it relates to self-publishing.
Sure. Thank you, Heather. It's great to be here. I really appreciate this, and great to be with Matt and Phil. I started, I think like all of you, I started out writing as a little kid, and I worked through the ranks. I worked as an editor. I had a publishing company that I worked for, and then I started later. And self-publishing I got into out of my sheer frustration with traditional publishing. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot about the pros and cons of each, but I was a little frustrated that when you traditionally publish, unless you're world famous or you become world famous, you're just a number. You don't get to keep the ownership of your work. You don't have very much creative control over it. And I wasn't happy with that. And this was about 12 or 13 years ago when self-publishing was starting to become legitimate. It was a real thing. We had the tech to do it. And I thought, I'm going to take the jump and see what this is all about. And I have never looked back.
That's amazing. One of the things that I found most interesting about Kim when I started working with her so many years ago is that she has self-published a book on Lady Bathory, who is a countess, a serial killer.
Yes.
When did she live? How long ago was this?
She was born in 1560 and died in 1614. So about the time of Queen Elizabeth I.
Yes, which is interesting. And so her book is actually based off of a bunch of historical documents as it relates to, and they were all in German. So you translated them.
Yes, Latin, Hungarian, and German. One of my weird superpowers. So
yes, well, one of her many, many talents. So very, very cool. And I recommend that everybody check that out, because she's known as an expert.
It's good for Halloween. It's really fun. It's a history detective story of, did she really kill 300 people? Where does she even put the bodies? How is that possible?
Yeah. So very interesting. Very interesting. Matt, share a little bit with us about your journey to this point and your experience with self-publishing and what you're doing now.
I had always wanted to be a novelist growing up and throughout high school and everything, and went to college to get my creative writing degrees. I finished my MFA in creative writing, and then spent 5 or 6 years trying to break into the publishing industry, trying to get an agent, trying to get a publishing company. To look at my work. And so just out of frustration, I basically was at a writing conference, as you do when you're trying to break in. And one of the panels, the agents and editors on the panel were commenting on the fact that as little marketing that is done for new writers, by the publishing companies, you might as well be self-published. And that kind of got the idea rolling around in the back of my head. And so a couple of years later, I started a publishing company, just a small publishing company for kind of emerging writers. And I've done, that was 13, 14 years ago now, and I've done about 26 books in ebook and print and translations and one of them was done as an audiobook and things like that.
That is so impressive.
That's great.
That is really
Yeah.
wonderful. Phil, tell us a little bit about your journey as it relates to self-publishing, and maybe what you're working on now too, because you're working on something that's not self-published right now, correct?
Damn. Well, I have not done 26 books. Let's start with that.
I know. Well, that is so impressive. I know.
But you had, well, you did a good job of that. Here's what I will say. How do you follow that? Everything I did learn about self-publishing came from my friend Kim. So
Aw,
very
great.
proudly, it's quite an
Aw.
amazing full circle moment because
It is. I'm proud of you.
many
my
years
friend.
ago, thank you, more gray hairs, but I sat in your class.
Me too.
2010. No, you were
Yeah.
great. 2010, I learned about self-publishing from you and got the confidence to be able to do that. I left Full Sail, started my branding agency, started to speak as a way to teach people useful things to build their brands. And obviously Full Sail is one of those places I come back often and share some of the ideas that I'm thinking about. But I was actually challenged by a conference organizer in 2000, and I think it was 14 or 15. The organizer of the California Women's Conference said to me, Phil, you can't stand on our stage without a product to sell or a book to sell. She said, go write a book. And so I wrote a book because I was told to. Usually I do what I'm told. We wrote it in, I say we, because I had some help on it, but we wrote it in 2 months. And that book was about Twitter. And that was my first experience with self-publishing. I had a great experience with it. I'm sure I'll talk lots about that today. I swore I'd never go the traditional route. And of course, as soon as you say you're not going to do it, guess what
Right.
happens? Last summer, actually, this is fun. I'll tell the quick version of this, but I was with Justin Rathbun, my fellow inductee from Hall of Fame 12. I was in the audience, actually, no, sitting in the sound booth with him right before the matinee of Hamilton. And I got an email from Adams Media, the imprint of an imprint of Simon & Schuster, and they said, Phil, we'd love for you to write a book about AI for small business. Here are the details. Here's the advance. Would you like to write the book? And so the answer was yes. So I'm in the process of finishing up
Very
a
good.
book deal that I've been working on now. Not quite a year, but it will be a year this summer. And so I have, I guess, some insights that I can bring to the table, both self-publishing and also now in the midst of traditional publishing. So that's my background in this.
I love it.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. And your first book was Shut Up and Tweet. I remember that.
Yes.
I have a
yes,
copy in my
yes.
office.
I hope it's
So,
signed.
I think it is. If not, I will have you sign it next time I see you on
I'll write a
campus.
little love letter. Yes.
I love it. Well, I think one of the most important questions that we have for today, I'm going to direct towards Kim, and then I know Matt and Phil probably have some things to add to this as well. But when it comes to self-publishing, how do people choose the right platform? I mean, what are the pros and cons of the different platforms? Some of the most notable ones are Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing and Ingram Spark, but there are others. So Kim, could you start us off and share your opinion on what you, or
Sure.
and the pros and cons of each?
Yes. It's really about doing your research. When self-publishing first started out, it was very treacherous because there were a lot of what we affectionately call vanity presses. These back in the day were companies that you would have to pay them to self-publish, and a lot of times they would advertise in really nice sort of highbrow magazines, having this air of legitimacy, but they were really just a printing company that would want thousands of dollars from you to print your book for you, and then they would leave you hanging where you were responsible now for distribution and for marketing. And a lot of people doing this were just authors. They were artistic. They didn't know how to do. And it was worse because then they would try to get their book into sales channels or distribution channels, and the companies would look at them and say, well, you don't have the retail sale codes. You're not in the wholesaler catalogs. We couldn't even sell this if we wanted. So then we got lucky around, it was around, Matt and I have been doing this for a long time, and Phil too now. It was, CreateSpace was probably one of the first big ones, CreateSpace, Lightning Source, Lulu, Blurb, that were actually legitimate, where they were owned typically by big companies that already had wholesale and distribution and marketing. For example, CreateSpace at that time was owned by Amazon, Lulu by Barnes and Noble, and so their thought was, well, we don't want to be your publisher, we don't want to take your copyright, we don't want to deal with that, but we'll be happy to be your distributor and market your work. And so those companies were wonderful, and everybody jumped on the bandwagon getting into them. And for me, it was the time when the artist could truly be an entrepreneur. And for, I'd say, the last, roughly 10 years, it's been going swimmingly until more recent times, which I'll let, Matt and Phil speak to. There have been a whole bunch of companies now that have figured out, ooh, there's all these people who want to self-publish, and maybe there's a way we can scam them or charge them excessive amounts of money to basically do things for them that they probably could do for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's not fair.
Right. So you have to always do your research.
Yes. Anything that you guys would add, Matt and Phil, as it relates? Do you have a preference between any of these different options? Are there any other options that you've explored? Matt, would you like to go first?
Well, I started in 2010. I got into with Ingram, with a company called Lightning Source that eventually became Ingram Spark, simply because CreateSpace didn't have as many options as Ingram Spark did, as Ingram Spark did. Nowadays, Ingram Spark and KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, are pretty much equal. There's little nitpicky differences, but for the most part, either of them will really serve you. Both of them get your books worldwide as far as you want them to go. Lightning or Ingram Spark has slightly more publishing options still than Kindle Direct Publishing, but Kindle Direct Publishing has way more than most people need anyway, as far as dimensions of the books and options of paper and things like that. It's, either of those are great print on demand companies for print books. KDP, of course, has the ebook portion of it. The one company I'll add to this list for ebooks, if you want your ebook to be on Barnes & Noble and in the Apple Store and libraries and everywhere else, is a company called draft2digital.com, which had just merged with another company called Smashwords that was another big ebook publisher. But, I use Draft2Digital to kind of catch the last 30-40% of the sales that I don't get through Amazon. Amazon is still the biggest seller of ebooks, for me, as far as it goes.
You guys had mentioned too that, like, if you are with Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing, then you have the Amazon audience, right?
That's correct.
But where you might run into some issues because Ingram Spark, because they're competitors, they don't necessarily
play nice.
It's tricky.
They don't play nice with each other.
If you publish through Ingram, I'm not going to say you're going to be completely locked out of Amazon, but Amazon favors people who go through it a little bit more. You're not going to get necessarily as red carpet treatment as if you went through Amazon. On the other hand, if you come into the retail market, like Matt was saying, into Barnes & Noble or something, they are going to work more with Ingram, and the retailers are going to look at Amazon as a competitor and say, ooh, Amazon. So I'm sure we'll talk about the nuances a little bit later, how you might strategize that. But it is true. You have to really know, what is my goal with distribution? Who is my audience? And what company would serve me best?
Okay. Phil, do you have anything that you would like to add?
I do, believe it or not. That's all great feedback. I would say don't underestimate the value of also doing an audiobook. So one of my greatest takeaways with going through the self-publishing process, I did CreateSpace, KDP. I thought, well, maybe should I do an audiobook as well? And I remember reflecting on my sales in the first year, and audiobooks were almost neck and neck with actually print sales. And it was shocking to me that people wanted to listen to me talk. Just kidding. But it was fun to make. And I'm just thinking about our Full Sail family here. We've got a lot of, media savvy people. Yes. I really enjoyed the process of creating the audiobook, and there was an incentive essentially. It's been a while since I've looked at this, but it was, at least back in the day, it was when I would bring a new customer to Audible with my book, they would pay me a bounty. I think it was around $50 at the time. I don't know if that's changed. Yeah, right. But it really added up. And I
Yeah.
actually did
Yeah.
very well with audiobook sales. So now, even in the process of doing a traditional publishing deal, I said to them, please, obviously, as Kim said early on, I don't have the control that I'm used to when I self publish now, but I suggested to them that for me, given that I'm a speaker and that I'm, educating people on this stuff, I said to them, please let me do an audiobook because in my experience, this was a great way to just have another format for people to consume and learn from you.
Yeah. And if you're like
Yeah.
me, all I do is listen to audiobooks.
Mhm.
I'm not
There
a,
you go.
Yeah.
you know, I get my reading time in when I'm in my car, and that's it.
I do have a quick news flash. If
Yes.
you're debating between Amazon's KDP and Ingram Spark, it's very new. Now, depending on when you watch this video down the road, it may not be news anymore. But as of today's date, when we're doing this presentation, Amazon and KDP and Ingram are partnering together to bring the new KDP Pro line. And I'm going to tell everybody, I have contacted them to get some information about this, where they're kind of offering to bring the best of both worlds in this combo where, yes, we're going to use Ingram to get you the possible retail options that Ingram's famous for. Yes, we're going to get you into Amazon for the online digital market that they're famous for. I did have a question, which we're going to probably talk about later, about what are the cons, though, of being in the retail trade. There are significant cons to it, something you really want to be thinking about. And I'm going to just say preliminarily, it took me 5 people to get finally to an answer that those same cons of getting into the retail book trade are still in existence with this fabulous new Ingram KDP hybrid that has just launched. So
Yeah. Well, and that actually ties into one of the questions that I was going to ask you
great.
guys about, because I know that you can self-publish and sell your books on Amazon, and you can do those things. But for those people who want to get their content into a bookstore or into libraries, like they want to put their content they want to see their book on the shelves of Barnes and Noble.
yeah.
How can authors do that? I mean, you mentioned that as a resource, but what are some strategies that writers can take in order to see their stuff, physical copies, on the shelves of bookstores?
Well, I'll defer the technical aspects to Matt and to Phil on marketing and that, but I will say, everybody's got that dream. I want to walk into the bookstore and see my book on every shelf. But the hard reality is, even though Ingram can logistically get you on those shelves in a way that Amazon KDP cannot, because it's Amazon and retailers and Amazon are direct competitors and they don't play well. There's the reality, though, that a bookstore is limited in the number of copies it can stock. And so it's not going to stock something that is not very well known unless it has a great demand for it. So the reality, just because they can get you in the retail trade doesn't mean they will.
Right.
There's another con to that I'll address and then open it back to Matt and Phil, is that I don't know always if I want to be in the retail trade, because the fact is, as a means of bookstores being able to survive with them buying things on speculation, they don't like the risk of having these books sitting around collecting dust. So they're often going to ask you, if we buy copies of your book to stock on our shelves, you as the author have to agree to a buyback, meaning somewhere around, depends on the company, but on average about 30%, they're allowed to tell you, the author, we didn't sell these copies. We paid you for them already. We want 30% of that money back. And here, author, are the unsold copies. You have your choice. We can mail them to you, or we'll destroy them for you.
Wow.
And as a new author, you may not want to be burdened with that. If you're selling really well, it probably won't be an issue, or you'll have the money, you don't care, or you'll restock the books and sell them elsewhere. But if you're brand new, you may want to think carefully about whether you want to be in Barnes & Noble right away.
Yeah, that's great advice. I didn't realize that you would have to do a buyback. That could be very costly, I would
Yes.
imagine. My goodness. Matt, is there anything that you would add?
I understand the mindset of like, my book's got to be in bookstores for it to be a real book, where that's when I've made it. It's with our film students, or Kim, you've probably seen this with your students as well, it's like they want their films to be in the theaters. If the film isn't in a theater, then it's not a real film.
Right.
Which is an
Yeah,
old
it's
way
silly.
of looking at the entertainment industry. There's plenty of films
Exactly.
that are legitimate films that never see theaters these days.
Mhm.
In the beginning of ebooks weren't real books.
Right.
Now they're
Yeah.
more acceptable as real books.
Yeah.
It is what I tell people or authors when they want their, when am I going to see my book on the shelf at Barnes and Noble? It's when you've got a huge demand, right? When there's a customer demand that it's worth it for Barnes and Noble to put your book on the shelf, they will, or Books A Million or whoever.
Mhm.
It's not, they're not gatekeeping as far as, oh, that's self-published and we don't want it. If it's self-published and it did well, heck yeah, they'd put it on the shelves.
Yeah.
It's just the economics of retail.
Yeah. Great advice. And yeah, it's okay to have an ebook.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's still a book.
Yeah.
So once,
Still a
okay, so
book.
once you go through these resources, right, of self-publishing, the next step is to have a successful book launch,
Yes.
right?
If
So-
Heather, if you excuse me one second, I just want to say, if you're self-publishing with Ingram or KDP, you're not just, I want our reader or our listeners to know, you're not just limited to an ebook though. As print-on-demand companies, they can also make paperback and hard copy books, do books in color. Matt can speak to this really well too. I think Ingram does offer you more suggestions and more options than KDP.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I did a graphic novel with Ingram. Print on demand technology is incredible.
Yeah.
We had, fields of black with white text on it. And, then we were adding color on top of this, and the printing was gorgeous. They're able to do lots of, really high-end stuff.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to do metallic ink or, cut the window out of the cover of your book so you can see through it or something like that.
Right.
But as far as the quality straight up of books, yeah, they're doing incredible books.
And then you could just sell those physical copies like through your website or through other
Yeah.
places.
Well, and
so
with Ingram, with Ingram and KDP, they get listed on the websites, on barnesandnoble.com, on booksamillion.com, on Amazon, all the Amazon sites around the world.
Yes.
that's
It's
great.
not just,
Yeah.
we talked about this a little bit earlier. It's not just, in the United States or I sell books in India, I sell books in Africa, and I'm amazed when, I get my sales reports. It's a couple of bucks because I sold one book, but it's still like, hey, I'm an international selling author now.
There you go. That's right.
There are.
That's right. And
wonderful.
it's not like people can't get your book in Barnes and Noble. It might not be on the shelf, but like Matt was saying, if you're going through Ingram or KDP, they're in the wholesaler catalogs and can be ordered by any library. They can be ordered by any retailer. So it's not like you're cut out of that.
That's amazing. Is that what you
Right,
did with
yeah.
Shut Up and Tweet, Phil? With your
Yeah. Yeah. I remember thinking, oh my gosh, it would be so nice to see my book in a store. And then I would just remind people, I think, Matt, you said this, it's just the way retail goes. Watch an episode of Shark Tank and see how painful it can be to go the retail route. There are so many sharks that basically say, don't do it. It seems appealing, but so many people get paid along the way. And that is money out of your business, out of your pocket. Sometimes the lesser exciting option tends to be the most profitable. And so I learned early on that the more direct I can make the sale, be it from my website, be it as part of a speaking engagement, I could include a certain number of book copies as part of a speaking fee. There's all kinds of creative ways to do this, but generally the more control or the more access you have, the more money you keep. And back to the Shark Tank reference, typically the most profitable entrepreneurs, product or service, are the ones that do business online. And so it might not seem as exciting because it's not a physical book in Barnes and Noble. It's a I know, I've got friends that sell products in retailers, and it's the same thing. It might not seem as sexy, but it's more profitable. And let's be honest, more profitable is more sexy. Okay.
I think we need to frame that one.
Get a
That's
t-shirt
frameworthy.
with that.
A
I
t-shirt.
Like it.
More profitable is more sexy. I love it. So let's talk about successful book launches, right? So you've now published your book, you have it in physical or ebook form or an audiobook, whatever format you're releasing your book in. What are some of the essential steps to planning and executing a successful book launch? And Matt, would you like to, how do you like, what do you tell your students on how to get that book out there in front of as many people as possible?
Professional reviews. Pre-publication professional reviews. You've got to have me talking about my book, right, isn't as powerful as a reviewer recommending my book.
Sure.
Or recommending it. Like, of course, I think it's awesome. I wrote it, but reviewers talking it up or, mentioning it in Reels or on BookTube or Book Talk or whatever, you got to do the research, find out who the reviewers are that review your genre, and get your book to them. Figure out how, research them, message them, find out how you can send them a review copy of your book. That's that's the beginning of word of mouth. That's them starting to talk about your book.
Yeah, it's just like when we have guest speakers come to Full Sail and the students like to listen to what they're saying, but the teachers are like, oh, you're an expert, but it's the same thing with a peer-reviewed book by somebody else. It's like, oh, well, that must be good because somebody else said it was good.
Yeah.
So, any other tips from you, Kim or Phil? Phil, would you like to share anything too about like how to get things out there in front of, like to sell as many books as possible? What's your strategy behind that?
Well, I have ideas on that. Come on. Something that Matt just reminded me of, professional reviews, but also what about not professional reviews? I know for the launch of my book that we're planning later this year, I want to make sure that on platforms like Amazon, I know you have to be careful with outwardly asking for reviews, but I could politely suggest to my friends that they might leave their opinion on, on Amazon if it's something that they enjoyed reading. Those types of things really help. It's the same thing that you mentioned, Heather, this idea of like word of mouth and also like proof of concept. It's really powerful to hear from someone else's mouth that they enjoyed the experience of your book. On that note, I would think of your book as an experience. I know that sounds kind of corny, but typically when we're looking at content that we want to stand out, that we want to resonate with an audience that you've identified, hopefully, in the process of writing the book, think about how are you going to educate? How are you going to entertain? How are you going to engage your audience? Simply posting about the book is probably not enough. That might work the day that the launch happens, but it's not that exciting, especially if you keep framing it as that. My book launched last week. My book launched a month ago. I don't really care. I have a lot of things I need to worry about today. But instead, if you were to frame it as, here's something to think about, or here's an experience that someone had. I'm thinking in the context of my book, which is about AI. Here's an example of someone using AI within their business productively. You might be able to learn from this, leading with the value, leading with the experience, leading with that little nugget that people can connect with. Then swing in and say, I go into more detail on this book, or in my book. My book talks about 100 other ways that you can be doing this, or, I cover every aspect of business in this. These are just some examples of things that I've been thinking about. Lead with, how am I going to entertain? Or if not entertain, how am I going to educate? How am I going to engage people? Beyond just the fact that you have a book, go a little bit deeper and connect with people on what the book is about and the motivation behind why they might want more.
Absolutely.
I'm a big fan too of the press release. I think we've all heard the expression, we often drink from a well we haven't dug.
Right.
And there are markets out there, people have already dug the well. They've got all kinds of fan bases already in place followings already in place of people that would be warm or hot leads that would love what we've written. So what I need to do is tap into that world and not steal those people, but share them, bring them over into my world, and suddenly start growing my fan base exponentially because I got a group of 500 people from this source, 1,000 people from this source, 20 people, 20,000 people from this one. And how I reach out are to those, like Phil used the word gatekeeper, and I'll use that word, but they're not always that formidable. A lot of times they actually want to expand their audiences too. And so with a press release or an invitation to do, hey, let's do a link exchange. Hey, I'll feature you in my newsletter or my blog or my site or my video. Would you, like to do some sort of an exchange like that? With the press release, it's free to make. They've got templates online. You can design one very quick, very easily. You just need to do a little research about who are your top 5 demographics or infographics or psychographics that these markets are. And you reach out to these people that do already have the fan base and the following built. They've dug that well. You send this out to them. You don't get, it doesn't cost you anything to do that. A polite email to them, the press release attached, and say, hey, is there something we can, do to collaborate that I can help, grow your base and we connect? And I have grown. I started out with 8 people in a fan base. And they were like relatives or friends. And by doing that, in less than 3 months, I was past 15,000. Wow. And I just keep sending out, and then it starts growing exponentially and very organically. You're not spending any money doing this. You're just spending a little time researching, and it's free to send out the press releases. And then, like Phil was saying, you can also then get these testimonials, because these people who are in media or they have their own sites, can be writing, oh, this was amazing, or I loved it, or whatever it may be. Hey, can I quote you on this? And pretty soon you've got 20 testimonials.
Amazing.
Free.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, a lot of it's like reciprocity, right?
Yes.
It's like I'll scratch your back.
You
if
make
you scratch
friends.
mine. You
Yes.
make friends. And even doing like podcasts like what we're doing
Yes.
today, a lot of times I'll listen to podcasts on certain topics.
Right.
And they'll have authors of books that are on there that are related to the, so researching podcasts that are out there related to the
Exactly.
topic that your book is about.
Yes.
Could really be a
and
helpful thing.
they're looking for content too.
Absolutely.
Don't ever be shy. The worst they can tell you is, no, I'm sorry, I can't do it right now. But almost everybody is looking to find content and fill programming time. So do not hesitate to reach out to media.
Yeah. That's great.
Sales and marketing can feel so overwhelming, right? It feels like you're standing at the start line of a marathon. And to be honest, it kind of is. But Kim, that was such a concrete way of breaking down, okay, it's a marathon, but how do we tackle each mile? And then how do we break it down to how do we tackle each quarter mile? How do we tackle each step?
Yeah.
And so you just gave a really specific example of how transformative it can be to carve out 15 to 20 minutes a day, be it ask for a review, be it pitch yourself to a podcast, be it email or text a friend. Like that has a compounding effect. Exactly.
Yes.
And that's what I see most writers, self-published writers, seem to be frustrated with, is they don't realize, they're focused on launch day, and then they want to sit back and watch the money roll in. But you've got to keep doing the work.
Yes.
You've got to keep, it's, I tell my students when they ask me, how do I decide to publish a book? I say, I've got to love it because I'm going to read it 4 times, but then I'm going to sell it for the next 5 years. I know that I'm going to be talking about it and promoting it for that long.
Yeah. And I love the idea of like just one small thing a day will lead to exponential things. Because I think sometimes we think, oh man, I have this is such a daunting task. I have so many things I could be doing.
Right.
But if you just break things into, okay, I'm going to request one testimonial today. Or I'm going to do,
that's right.
It's
and you
just one
keep
thing
a
at time.
journal too of your accomplishments, and feel like you were saying those milestones. I'm setting those goals, and it's so satisfying to look back over time. You've got your dreams and your goals, and you look back months later and go, oh my gosh, I did all those.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of the power of keeping those notes, those logs, those journals. They really help you stay on track.
That's wonderful.
Even writing as a goal, because so many authors never get to this point because they never finish the book.
Yeah.
That is the biggest problem I see with clients or students. And it's like, what is stopping you? And, everybody's got, I don't have the time, or I have to wait for all the stars and planets to align when I'm feeling creative. It's like, no, treat it like a job where you're carving out, like we're saying, even if it's 20 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, 1 page a day. If you write 1 page a day in 1 year, you've got a 365-page book.
Yes.
Come on, guys.
Yep.
And don't worry. Don't get obsessed about, it doesn't sound good. Just write, let it flow. You can edit later.
Yeah.
Yeah, first drafts never sound good.
No,
Yeah,
no.
but it's just getting it out there, like getting something on paper.
Yes.
Is like the first step.
That's it. Then the floodgates open.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things that Phil mentioned earlier is about audiobooks. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that. What are some of the opportunities and challenges that you guys have experienced with producing audiobooks and then also translating books into other languages? Matt, would you like to comment on that first?
Sure. The first opportunity, of course, is more sales channels or more opportunities to reach other customers. The challenge is that it usually involves a layout of cash or an expense. Now, Phil, he was able to do his own book. That's awesome. You can narrate your own book. A lot of writers either can't or don't want to do that. So you've got to either hire or pay a narrator to do it, a voice actor to do it, or cut them in for a percentage of the profits of the audiobook itself. Translations as well, and there's a big difference with translations, especially for people doing fiction. Most translators do technical translations, literal translations. You need, if it's a fiction book, you need somebody that does a literary translation that's going to catch the spirit or the nuances of what you're getting at, the idioms and things like that. We did one translation from English into Spanish, and it was a great, easy experience. I had a wonderful translator that did it. It hasn't sold very well, unfortunately, but it's also just really hard for me to reach out to Spanish audiences because I'm not on Spanish social media. But there's the cost involved, and are you going to earn back the investment? Do you have an audience? I guess not so much look before you leap, but if there's a demand and people are asking for it, then go ahead and do it. If there isn't a demand, don't, I feel like we did the Spanish translation before there was a demand for the book at all.
Point.
Yeah.
And so
market research, I guess, would be helpful.
Yeah.
In that.
Yeah.
Okay. Great advice. How about you, Phil? Anything that you've experienced as far as challenges or opportunities? I mean, obviously it created an opportunity for you with your audiobook, but did you run into any issues that you'd like to comment on?
It's been a few years since I self-published. I would say as the years passed, I kind of got busy with new projects and didn't do a great job of keeping the book and the book sales a priority. That I struggled with because I got more excited about new things versus continuing to sell the thing that I worked hard on before that. I would also say
We have so much
yeah,
time.
there's only so much time. To Matt's point too, even if something fails, even if something doesn't perform as well, that isn't necessarily a failure. Sometimes those are risks that you have to take in business. Those are calculated risks, realizing it might work or it might not, as with any kind of investment of time or money. So I would just encourage people, if it's a failure, sometimes it's a really important lesson in how it might inform the strategy forward. Maybe the strategy is we tried that once, we tried that in Spanish, so we're not going to do that anymore. Or maybe the strategy is we did that before we knew that there was demand for it. So the next time we go to do it, let's look for some proof of concept to make sure there's demand. Those are really important lessons. So I wouldn't necessarily say that those are failures. I generally go in the path of lesser resistance. So if creating an audiobook is a path of resistance, you have to hire someone to narrate it, you have to invest in studio time to get it recorded, then I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm saying don't prioritize it. It probably shouldn't be on your to-do list of the first 10 things that you need to do. For me, I had a podcast at the time. I do digital workshops. So I was set up. I mean, I'm traveling in Berlin right now, and this microphone is the same microphone that is set up in my home studio where I do YouTube content and trainings and such. It's really easy for me to record high quality audio. In fact, I'm more likely to be engaged by reading something than I am like by talking it than by physically reading a book. I have a very short attention span. Anyone who knows me knows that. And so it's a path of lesser resistance for me. It was almost easier to do the audiobook than the written book. Not almost, it was.
Yeah.
And so just think about for you and your own unique brand and your own antics. What are those paths of lesser resistance?
Yeah.
Lean into those.
You know,
Yeah,
I'm the queen of lesser resistance. If I can make it easy because I'm lazy, I'll do it. I'm going to throw out the joy of AI. And AI will do it for you quick and cheap and easy. Depends how good it's going to be. And sometimes for AI to do those translations or to do those voiceovers, you can get it done free or really inexpensively. My suggestion, if you use it, phonetically spell out names, places, nouns, things that are specialty. Otherwise, it's going to butcher it, and everybody listening is going to know it's an AI voice.
Yeah.
But if you're using KDP right now, they're doing beta testing with it. They'll do it for free. They will.
Interesting.
Yeah, they'll do an AI audiobook for you free right now.
Well, that's so interesting. I know
I have-
Phil's writing a whole book on AI right now. So
very strong opinions on that. And that is
I
very
know.
good advice.
I thought I had to throw it out, but I know what you mean, Phil. Matt, you too. I know.
People right away assume that AI is going to be a shortcut. And I think for AI to really shine and add value to the project, it's actually going to still take you some time to craft the input to get a good output.
Yes.
I'll give you an
absolutely.
example. I had a bit of imposter syndrome when I was asked to write a book on the topic that, to be truthful, I still don't necessarily consider myself an expert in, since it's only been publicly available for a year and a half. However, I do feel confident in my ability to research and understand something and share my findings in a way that's memorable and useful for people. So I like using AI to condense, to summarize, to give alternate opinions, to help me brainstorm ideas, but the input has to be good if the output is going to be anything of value. So I have saved prompts such as, do not use these words, revolutionize, unleash. Like, there are certain words that we all know.
every
Yeah,
single
yeah.
output.
Exactly. And that
It's like
is a form
red
of
flag,
Yes,
AI.
So take time to, let me give 2 tool recommendations since I'm a nerd for this stuff. Take the time to construct your inputs, if you will. So I use a tool called TextBlaze. In any instance where I repeat myself more than once, so for example, telling ChatGPT, don't say unleash, don't say revolutionize, and I have a list of 30 other words I tell it not to say, I use a Google Chrome extension, a free Google Chrome extension called TextBlaze, and I can type a shortcut or a short code, so \avoid words. And anytime I type that in Google Chrome, it pre-populates my prompt that I'm continually adding to every day. So when I find another word that I don't want it to say, I quickly go into TextBlaze and add that word. Second thing, the most valuable tool right now for those of you writing a book purely based on your own ideas and work is not ChatGPT, because the huge risk, still, it's getting better, but there's still a risk. ChatGPT hallucinates, which means it misrepresents false information as true or accurate.
Right.
Many people know I work very closely with Adobe. Specifically, the example I'm going to give is Adobe Acrobat has a brand new feature called AI Assistant, and you interface with it just how you might with ChatGPT. But what I love about it is it doesn't make stuff up. When you say, here's 100 pages of notes, of ideas, of this book that I'm writing, could be blog posts, social media posts saved as a PDF, etc. It could be 100 pages of information. And I could say, help me turn this into a book. Let's write the opening chapter together. it's going to help you, but it is not going to make anything up. It's going to only source the output with the input that you provide. So I have found that this tool to be amazing, trustworthy, reliable, and safe to use for particularly subject matter experts that are writing a book or that are wanting to finish that book that Kim said people start and never seem to finish.
Amazing. I'm going to have to check
Excellent.
that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have not checked out what Adobe has, but I trust your judgment on that. So I know we have a live audience here with us today. I mean, well, virtual live audience. And I know they have some questions for you guys as well. I think just before we get to their questions, I know as it relates to the future of self-publishing, right? I do want to comment to this real quick. I know AI is a big part of that future, and I know that those were really helpful tools that Phil provided. What else do you see in the future of self-publishing? Do you think AI is the end-all be-all? Do you feel that there's any threats as it relates to content that's being developed with the help of AI?
Yeah.
Any comments from Kim or Phil or Matt as it relates to that topic?
There's so much one could say. We're all like,
Yeah.
where do we start? I'll just throw this out. Started as, to me, one of the first legitimate means in which an artist could become an entrepreneur. That Pandora's box, good or bad, has been open. That's not going to close again. Mm-hmm. The technology we have that allows us to reach a global audience for hardly any money to communicate our ideas, that box is not going to close anymore either. And now with AI, the things that we can do with it to help us on the creative side, the administrative side, taking the grunt work out of life, that is not going to close either unless, I don't know, we have an apocalypse or, some dystopian horrible thing. Mm-hmm. I see it continuing to go, but as we speak, there's always forces that are working to balance things. And right now, as we're speaking, we've got a lot of legislation pending about how we're going to regulate AI, how we're going to regulate the whole self-publishing industry, how we're going to regulate anything you can think of that's cutting edge today. And it's like the gold rush. Pretty soon, everybody's going to jump in on the bandwagon and, of course, start to regulate it and centralize it. And all the glory is going to fade. And then we'll go on to the new thing. So I just say look forward to a lot more regulation, look more to always staying ahead of the curve so you can continue to be part of a new gold rush and expect what worked for you 5 or 10 years ago is not going to work for you 5 or 10 years later.
Absolutely. Great advice. Anything that you guys would like to add?
Well, look for, more competition, just because more and more people are going to be getting into it and more people are going to be self-publishing and doing it. I see most of the technological changes or the big issues coming up are going to be on the marketing side of things. Rather, yes, they're automating the formatting of physical books and ebooks and making that easier, but that's not super dramatic. But a lot of it's going to be, what's going to be after TikTok,
Right.
What's coming after TikTok, what's coming, what's going to be the next thing to change for YouTube or whatever. That's where I think things are going to be coming.
Yep. And you can't tell the future on those things, and those popular platforms are going to be evolving over time. So that's a great point. Phil.
Yeah, use the exercise of writing a book and self-publishing a book as something that is fulfilling for you beyond making money from it. In my eyes, that's a bonus of the project because chances are it won't happen. Please prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. That's a challenge. But here's what I love about writing a book. Here's what I love about making a YouTube video. Here's what I love about showing up on social media in the capacity that I have time to and to teach people things that I know or that I think about. The truth is, I got a book deal last summer because I made a YouTube video about ChatGPT. I shared very little in that video in terms of education, but it was more so bringing people along the journey of what I was discovering and what I was thinking. And that was a tangible example, proof of concept to a publisher. I know that's not what we're talking about, but they saw that and went, we know, we have confidence that he can write a book. So for you to self-publish, the most amazing thing is not necessarily a dollar figure that comes from the project, but it's you first, to Kim's point, finishing a project instead of letting it just remain an idea, which is like so many examples of people that hire me and pay me a lot of money to give feedback on idea that never becomes reality. I find it very frustrating that you can tell
I'm
from
taking
my voice.
clients for that now, just
Yeah.
because of that. It's stealing their money. I feel like it.
Finish the project.
Well, I'm happy to take
Right.
their money still.
Then,
Yeah, I'm happy to
then
still
we'll
take their
talk.
money.
I
Yeah.
needed to hear this today, guys. I really needed to hear this advice today. So,
Finish it and be really excited for someone to land on your book. It doesn't need to be thousands of people. All it takes is one reader to go, oh my gosh, I need this person to stand on stage at my conference.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I need this person to come give a workshop to my audience of insert the variable. Oh my gosh, I need to reach out to this person and work with them and hire them. All it takes, that's what you're doing. You're finishing a project. You're showing that you are indeed an expert on insert topic. And that is so unbelievably powerful.
yeah. Well, thank you for that advice for sure. We have a couple questions here from our audience. The first one here, I'm looking to publish a few things and I have been having a hard time with publishers, software, and illustrators. Any advice?
Get thee to a print on demand. They will take care of all those problems for you. If you're not artistically savvy and you don't know how to use InDesign and Adobe, you don't have to. If you go to KDP, they have a whole selection of templates for your cover art. They have templates for your inside cover material that you can scale it to the size you want. You can drag and drop whatever you'd like into it. They have a whole library of royalty-free color and black and white photos that you can design it yourself for free with not that much stress. And it's also formatted. You can upload it right in and it's going to work. Formatting is your biggest nightmare. It is your biggest enemy when self-publishing because it's got to comply with all these specifications. So if the company itself offers you the templates that are already formatted the way they like, it will make your life so easy. Use
Great.
the templates they give you.
Use the templates. Okay, great advice.
Keep in mind, it costs more to print a color book than it does a black and white book. If you've got one color illustration in there, you've got a color book.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Great advice. Let me see if we can go to our next question from the audience. I'm going to lean on our social team to scroll down if they can. And if they can't, then I will ask a different question.
Nope.
They're trying. Hold on, guys. Okay, there we go. How do you promote self-published works on social media? Do you do online readings or Patreon subscriptions or anything along those lines?
You could.
You could. Yeah, there's no, it's not a right or wrong. There's no one fits all approach to this. I wish there was like a secret formula to follow for marketing your book, but there isn't. And so there's been some, I think, combine all of the feedback that we've given you in this hour. I would come back to follow the path of lesser resistance. You don't need to show up on a social media platform that you find difficult. For example, I don't like TikTok. I don't like it. I don't like it. I open it and it gives me anxiety. And so I don't create on that platform, even though there's tremendous potential to grow an audience and to reach new people. I recognize that. I really like creating video content on YouTube. And so that's easy for me and it's fulfilling for me. And so that's what I focus on. I accept the fact that I can't show up everywhere. I'm just one person, even with a team. I have to have those kind of realistic expectations. I lean into these social media platforms where I actually enjoy creating content. So don't feel like you need to be any particular place. Don't feel like you need to post any certain number of posts, or even worse, don't feel like you need to post at a certain time of the day. Those days are gone. Algorithm changes. Now it's more about you creating high quality, engaging, educational or relatable or entertaining content that's going to resonate with the masses. Again, kind of self-indulgent in this way, I like the idea of being active on social media as a way of testing your concepts. It's kind of like,
Mm.
you know, running a little like a test group on certain ideas that you might go into more detail on in the book, for example. Always make this about you. What do you get out of it versus, oh my gosh, I'm going to be on social media so millions of people discover my book and buy it. It's kind of like, how can social media, how can being active on social media be those little mini mile marks to finishing the book and testing ideas and seeing how they resonate?
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
great.
And one thing I'd say not to do, don't make every post, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. It's summarizing what Phil is saying. People go on the internet to be entertained and informed, right? Not to be sold to. Think about the people you follow and all their posts are buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. You stop following them, or you stop liking them or whatever. So I tell my students, every time you do a post that is buy my thing, you need to do 8 or 9 other posts that are informative or entertaining. One of the biggest mistakes I see self-publishers make is that every post they do, it's like, this is my book, here's my book cover, here's my book, here's this. And your audience only needs it once or twice, and then that's it.
That's great. Great advice.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask 2 more questions. So this next one here is about what are some of the common mistakes that you see new self-published authors make, especially at launch time?
Thinking, I got it out there, my work is done. This is kind of like I'm on a little deserted island in the middle of the ocean. I put the message in the bottle, throw it in the water, and think, I'm sure 1 million people are going to see this. Right. And you see people think, well, I put it on my website, or I put it on Facebook. What is it? I'm sure everybody will see it. No, they won't. What you want to be doing is thinking in terms of the algorithm for the search engine optimization. And you want to think of it like every single social media engagement you have, every connection, every link of your site to another site is creating a web, a matrix of connections. And when the algorithms for Google, for Amazon, you're good. All these things, when they're making a determination, who are we going to rank number 1 or high up in a search versus being, I'm number 8 million or something, they're relying on these connections you're making. So as part of your checklist every day, you do want to be getting yourself out there in as many places as you can, but you also want to focus on getting the internet heavy hitters. You need to have your work on Amazon. If you can, you need to have a video on YouTube. You need to have a connection. You need to be on Wikipedia. You need to be in all the major social media sites, and all those sites refer to your website, to your video. Everything keeps interconnecting. You're building this matrix that is going to help the algorithms realize, oh, Kim's book there's an entry on Wikipedia, and oh my gosh, now she's also on Amazon, and there's a YouTube video of her, and oh my gosh, and she's connected to this website. Of old websites that have been out there for years are also heavy hitters in those metrics. So every day with your marketing plan, just get another thing out there and make sure you're getting your presence with the social media heavy hitters to really trigger those algorithms so they can find you easily. Absolutely. And keep reinforcing it. You have to do it every day to keep driving yourself back to the top.
Yep, that's
and
right.
Look yourself up.
Yeah, because the more content that exists, the more content that exists related to your book that's out there, and the more it's connected, it's going to boost your ranking in the search engine. So that's really great advice. Anything from Phil or Matt that you might want to add?
I would say people rushing to get their book out, right? They finish a first draft and they package it and they're ready to upload it onto Amazon, ready to go. And the first draft is usually a mess. You need to do revisions. You need to read it. You need beta readers to look at your stuff. There's a lot of writers feel they've got to get it out there as soon as possible, so it can start making money. And that rush isn't necessarily there, except for maybe with Phil's upcoming book on AI and business, where it's a little bit more topical. But especially with fiction, a lot of the time, you've got there's no reason to rush it and sacrifice quality of the book. You don't want to sit on it for 5 or 10 years either, but
Sure.
don't just, I wrote it over the summer and it's done and I want it out there.
That's great.
Even with the topical nature of my book, timeline got extended today, and it's over a year in the making. And for
Wow.
those reasons you just described, editors felt like we needed just one more comb through to make sure that this book was really positioned for beginners. And I really appreciated that. And so if you're self-publishing, that filter might be, a friend, a colleague, a family member, someone less familiar with the project, to take a look and say, hey, have you considered this perspective? To Matt's point, if that adds a month or two to the launch, in the grand scheme of things, you're launching a 10 out of 10 instead of what could easily be a 6 out of 10 or less. That's really important. It's very hard for you to control that yourself as the author, as the creator. That outside opinion is just hugely important.
That's awesome. Well, my last question of the day, because I want to be respectful of all of your time, from our audience, what do you think about having the expense of a book signing, like at a trade show, just to get in front of a highly targeted audience? Do you feel that it's worthwhile? Is the expense worth the reward? What do you guys think?
It would really, really have to be a targeted trade show.
Yeah.
Like I've done general book fairs, the Miami Book Fair, the AWP conference, done things in Orlando at different universities and things. And buying a booth to do signings at one of those things, you're one of 1,000 other booths. And even if there's 10,000 people that are at the event, there's only so many people that are actually going to stop at your booth. If you've never been to a conference before or been to a trade show floor before, walk it and see how quickly it takes your brain to get full and how quick you just start ignoring stuff and you're just walking with blinders on. I spent, I hate to make this on my mistakes, but it was the AWP conference in Seattle. 10,000 writers from across the country were going to be there. I was one of 10,000 booths, or one of 1,000 booths that were there. I sold 10 books.
Wow.
The whole time I was there. It was a wonderful vacation. It was a business, failure again, Phil.
Write it off as a business
But
expense.
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
But and it's good for you to share what you learned from that experience, though, too, because
I agree
can
with
see
that. I think the only way around that to make it worth your time, because everything Matt is saying is absolutely true. You spend a fortune, because these are expensive to rent.
Sure.
And again, unless you're already really known or you have something that is mind blowing, you're just going to be one of 1,000 others. My suggestion, though, if you can get in as a speaker on a panel, excuse me, if you can get in as a leader of a workshop, now you've got a driver, you've got a magnet where you can use that to leverage, and you've got copies of the book right there where you're speaking. Now you got a chance of selling something. But if I'm just spending the money to rent a table, it's not. I don't recommend it for somebody starting out.
Well, and that's what Phil did with his book.
That was my most successful ever book. It ended up being the launch, but I sold more books than Jack Canfield at the California Women's Conference. And I was completely unknown to every attendee, did a session that resonated with people, even though they didn't know who I was 45 minutes prior to that. They went, lined up, bought a copy of the book, and that was an amazing, amazing start.
Star, even if you're a star just for a few moments at a limited event. Phil was the star, and then people are like, oh my gosh, he's a genius. I need to buy his book. Oh, here it is, presto. And he's right there to sign it for me. That's how you make it work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I was going to say, I would say do a free signing, like at a local library or a local event where it's really cheap, just to get a feel for what kind of traffic it is. And it has nothing to do with who you are. I've spent, going to 3-day conferences, and you sit there for the first 2 days and hardly anybody pays any attention to you. Then the last day they come and buy the book or something like that. The first 5 years I had my publishing company, I was out almost every month at some sort of event.
Wow.
And it was great. It was a lot of fun. It was a blast. I got connected with a lot of writers and other publishers and things. But financially, I learned I had to be wiser about where I was going to do an event or set up or, sell books or whatever.
Yeah.
Being a speaker definitely helps.
Awesome. Well, that is great advice. I want to thank you guys so much for your time today. Phil, thank you for joining us from Berlin. Like, huge deal.
You know, I'm always happy to. These are my friends.
You are a superstar, and we appreciate you. Matt, I really enjoyed my time with you today. I'm going to be picking both your brain and Kim's brain in the near future about any more advice that you have related to this topic. So thank you guys for your time, and thank you to our audience who had such wonderful questions and listened to us today. So I appreciate all of you, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you so much.